An ancient circle of stone stands, silent on an English plain. This is Stonehenge, a monument that defies simple explanation. We are about to decode its secrets. You will discover the true story of how it was built, why its stones were brought from mystical lands far away, and what profound cosmic knowledge its creators encoded into its design. We will explore its role as a celestial calendar, a temple of sound, and a gateway to the spirit world. What forgotten power compelled our ancestors to move mountains of stone across the landscape? How did they achieve an engineering feat that would challenge us even today? By the end of this journey, you will see this ancient wonder not as a pile of rocks, but as a key to understanding humanity's deepest spiritual longings. What does a structure built for eternity tell us about our own place in the universe? The Salisbury Plain holds a quiet energy all its own. This vast, open landscape feels ancient, a place where the sky meets the earth in an unbroken line. For centuries, this energy has drawn people to its heart, to the great stone circle we call Stonehenge. The first written mention of the monument comes from the 12th century, from a historian named Henry of Huntingdon, who listed it as one of the wonders of England. He could only describe it as a collection of stones so immense they seemed like doorways, set in a way that no one could comprehend. For a long time, it was seen as a magnificent ruin, a puzzle from a forgotten age. Then, in the 17th century, a man named John Aubrey changed everything. Commissioned by King Charles II to study the site, Aubrey did not just measure the stones. He walked among them, feeling their presence and meticulously mapping the patterns of pits and mounds surrounding the central circle. He was the first to suggest this was not a haphazard arrangement, but a precise temple built by the druids, the learned priests of the ancient Celts. This was a monumental shift. Aubrey's work transformed Stonehenge from a curiosity into a subject of serious study, igniting a quest to understand its purpose. He captured the profound sense of awe that has clung to these stones for centuries, an awe that asks us not just who built it, but what deep spiritual need did it answer. Stonehenge was not built in a single lifetime or even a single century. Its creation was a sacred project spanning 1,500 years, a slow and deliberate blueprint laid down across generations. The first phase began around 3,000 years before the Common Era. The people of the Neolithic era did not erect giant stones. Instead, they marked the land itself, digging a massive circular ditch and bank known as a henge. They then dug a ring of 56 pits just inside this bank, now called the Aubrey holes, after the man who first identified them. These pits were not simple post holes. They held the cremated remains of the dead, transforming the site from an empty plain into a sacred cemetery, a place of ancestors and powerful memory. Centuries later, the second phase began. This is when the stones first appeared. Dozens of smaller pillars, each weighing up to 4 tons, were brought to the site. These are the blue stones, and their journey was as mystical as their color. They were transported over sea and land from the Preseli Hills in faraway Wales, a distance of nearly 150 miles. Why would a culture with only simple tools undertake such a monumental task? It was not for practicality. These blue stones were believed to hold healing properties and profound spiritual power. Their arrival transformed Stonehenge from a place of the dead into a place of potent, living energy. Then came the final, most awe-inspiring phase. Around 2,500 years before the Common Era, the truly massive stones arrived. These are the sarsens, the giant gray pillars and lintels that form the iconic outer circle and inner horseshoe. Some of these stones weigh as much as 50 tons. They were dragged over 20 miles across the countryside. The engineering feat is almost beyond comprehension. Using only ropes, wooden sledges, and sheer human effort, they raised these colossal blocks, and capped them with perfectly fitted lintel stones, locked together with complex joints. This was no longer just a ceremonial site. It became a permanent temple to the cosmos, a statement in stone that echoed through eternity. This multi-generational project reveals a truth far deeper than mere construction. It shows a civilization utterly devoted to a spiritual vision, one they were willing to work toward for 1,500 years. What could possibly compel such enduring dedication? The sheer scale of the stones is matched only by the epic journey they undertook, moving the massive sarcens from the Marlborough Downs, 20 miles to the north, was a logistical nightmare turned into reality. Picture teams of hundreds, perhaps even thousands of people. They would have used a combination of ropes, wooden sledges, and possibly greased timber rollers. The process was agonizingly slow, a constant battle against friction and gravity, with workers likely inching the 50-ton giants across the landscape at a rate of barely a mile per week. Some theories suggest they may have used a special trackway of crossed wooden poles to ease the passage, a testament to their ingenuity. The final leg of the journey may have involved floating the stones on rafts down the River Avon, turning a terrestrial struggle into a watery procession. But the journey of the Bluestones is even more staggering. Their origin in the Preseli Hills of Wales lies 150 miles away. How did a prehistoric society move 4-ton stones across such a vast and rugged distance? The leading theory involves a combination of land and sea. The stones could have been dragged on sledges to the Welsh coast, loaded onto large, stable rafts or boats, and then sailed along the treacherous Welsh and English coastlines before being brought up the River Avon and finally dragged overland once more to Salisbury Plain. Other, more controversial ideas have been proposed, including that glaciers during the last ice age carried the Bluestones part of the way, depositing them closer to the site. Yet, even if a glacier did some of the work, our ancestors still had to identify these specific, spiritually significant rocks and transport them the rest of the way. This was not a random act. It was a deliberate, targeted mission. The debate over transport methods misses the deeper point. The true mystery is not the how, but the why. What incredible force of will and shared belief could coordinate such an effort over generations? This was more than an engineering project. It was a pilgrimage. Each mile traveled, each river crossed, was an act of profound devotion, a physical prayer that transformed the very landscape into a sacred pathway. The value of these stones was not in their utility, but in their origin. Their power was derived from the distant, mystical land they came from. The journey itself infused the stones with meaning, making them far more than simple building materials. They became vessels of spiritual energy, carried by an entire community united in a single, sacred purpose. The true magic of the Bluestones lies in their origin. These are not ordinary rocks. They are spotted dolerite and rhyolite, a unique geological formation found in one specific place on Earth, the Preseli Hills in Western Wales. When freshly quarried, this dolerite shimmers with a bluish-gray hue, embedded with brilliant white crystals that catch the light like a starry night sky. Their very substance was extraordinary, but why would a civilization go to such impossible lengths for these specific stones? The answer seems to be that they were not merely building materials, but objects of deep spiritual power. For centuries, even millennia after Stonehenge was built, legends persisted about the healing properties of the Bluestones. In the local Welsh folklore, the Preseli Hills were considered a sacred landscape, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. The stones themselves were believed to hold curative energies. People would chip off small fragments to create healing talismans or to use as grinding stones for medicinal herbs, believing the stone's power would transfer into the remedy. This was a belief that spanned ages, suggesting a tradition that may have begun with the very builders of Stonehenge. There is another, more subtle quality to these stones. Some researchers have noted their unique acoustic properties. When struck, certain bluestones produce a distinctive, resonant chime, a clear, metallic ring that echoes unlike any local sarsen stone. In a culture that likely relied on oral tradition and ritual sound, this sonic signature could have been interpreted as the voice of the spirits, or the very sound of the earth's power. Imagine a ceremony within the circle, where the ringing of a bluestone marked a sacred moment. Its vibration felt deep in the bones of every participant. So the journey from Wales was far more than a simple transport of weight. It was a pilgrimage to the source of this power. The builders were not just moving rocks, they were physically connecting their great temple on the Salisbury Plain to a distant, ancestral power spot. They were weaving a sacred geography across the land, bringing a piece of that mystical Welsh energy to the heart of their world. The bluestones were the heart of Stonehenge long before the giant sarsens framed them, their presence a testament to a belief system that saw the entire landscape as alive, conscious, and filled with spirit. The true challenge began once the stones reached the site. Standing a 50-ton sarsen upright is a problem that would daunt modern engineers, yet they accomplished it with nothing but wood, rope, and raw intelligence. The process likely started with a massive foundation. Workers would dig a large, sloped pit with one end shaped into a steep ramp. The stone was then carefully inched down this ramp, its base settling into the bottom, while its top remained propped up on the far edge. Now came the delicate part. To pull the stone upright, they employed a simple but brilliant tool, The Chinese letter. A long, sturdy wooden beam or lever would be placed under the stone's raised end. Teams of people would pull down on the lever, using a large log as a fulcrum to lift the stone a few precious inches. Immediately, wooden stakes were driven into the ground to hold this new position. Then, they would reset the lever and pull again, repeating this painstaking process inch by inch, stake by stake, until the mighty stone stood perfectly vertical. But how did they lift the equally massive lintels, the horizontal stones that crowned the trilithons, to a height of over 15 feet? This required an even more ingenious system. They may have built a large wooden frame, a sturdy tripod structure positioned directly over the two upright stones. Ropes tied to the lintel would be threaded over the apex of this frame. But the real secret was the counterweight. Instead of relying on hundreds of people pulling on ropes, they could have used giant wicker baskets filled with stones. As workers steadily added more stones to the basket, its increasing weight would slowly and controllably hoist the lintel into the air. Once the lintel was raised high enough, it could be carefully guided and nudged into position atop the standing stone. The final touch was a masterpiece of prehistoric joinery. The top of each upright stone was carved with a protruding tenon, a rounded knob. The underside of each lintel was precision carved with two matching hollows, called mortise holes. As the lintel was lowered, these stone knobs slid perfectly into their stone sockets, locking the entire structure together with a stability that has endured for millennia. This was not brute force. It was a symphony of applied physics, a deep understanding of leverage, balance, and weight. Each step was a calculated risk, a testament to a culture that could not only dream of touching the sky, but could engineer their way to reach it. Locked within the very fabric of Stonehenge is a secret of ancient craftsmanship. The stones do not merely rest upon one another. They are intricately joined, as if by a master woodworker. Yet these are not pieces of timber. They are blocks of 50-ton sarsen sandstone. The builders carved the tops of the great upright stones with two rounded knobs, known as tenons. These were not rough protrusions, but carefully shaped and smoothed. On the underside of each massive lintel, they carved two corresponding hollows, called mortises. When the lintel was lowered into place, these knobs slid perfectly into their sockets, creating a solid, interlocking joint that has resisted millennia of wind and weather. But their genius did not stop there. The lintels of the great outer circle are themselves connected in a continuous ring. To achieve this, the end of each lintel stone was carved with a protruding ridge, a tongue, while the receiving end was carved with a matching groove. As one lintel was set next to another, this tongue slid smoothly into its neighboring groove, locking the entire circle together in a stable, unbroken chain of stone. This level of precision is staggering. They were replicating complex woodworking joinery, but on an impossible scale and in the most unforgiving material imaginable. They achieved these perfect curves, these exact fittings, using only stone hammers and mauls, grinding and polishing the surfaces with sand and water. This was not the work of a primitive tribe. It reveals a community of master architects and stonemasons, individuals who possessed a deep, accumulated knowledge of geometry, physics, and material science. This precision points to a culture that valued not just raw power, but the elegance of perfect form. They were not just stacking rocks to mark a place. They were building for eternity, with a skill that still commands our absolute respect. This architectural perfection was not merely for earthly stability. The precision of Stonehenge's form served a higher purpose, one that reached directly for the heavens. The entire monument functions as a colossal astronomical observatory, a stone computer for tracking the cycles of the cosmos. Its most famous alignment is undeniable. If you stand in the very center of the circle and gaze through the great entrance, you are looking along a processional avenue that points directly to the spot on the horizon where the sun rises on the summer solstice. On that longest day of the year, the sun's first rays would have shot directly down that avenue, piercing the heart of the circle in a dramatic burst of light. But this was only half of the solar story. The same central viewpoint also frames the winter solstice sunset in the opposite direction, marking the sun's death and rebirth as the year turned. This was not a coincidence. It was a deliberate, dual alignment that captured the two most critical moments in the solar year, moments that dictated the rhythms of planting and harvest, of life and death. Yet the celestial knowledge encoded here goes far deeper than the sun. The placement of the stones also tracks the complex dance of the moon. Our moon does not simply rise and set in the same place every night. Over a cycle of 18.6 years, the points on the horizon where it rises and sets slowly migrate between a northern and a southern extreme. This is a subtle, long-term pattern. Astonishingly, the 4 station stones, placed in a rectangle just outside the main circle, appear to align with these lunar extremes. When the moon reaches the most southerly point in its cycle, it would rise directly over one of these stones and set over another. This transformed Stonehenge from a simple solar marker into a sophisticated calendar capable of measuring a much grander, more mysterious cycle of time. Think of the implication. A culture we often think of as primitive was not only observing this multi-year lunar cycle, they were building a permanent, monumental record of it in stone. They were marking time on a scale that stretched beyond a single human lifetime, creating a legacy of cosmic knowledge for generations they would never meet. This was the true function of the circle, to bind the cycles of the earth to the eternal motions of the sky, creating a sacred space where humanity could witness the turning of the universe itself. One solitary stone stands guard just outside the main circle, a silent sentinel on the processional avenue. This is the heel stone, a weathered, 21-foot-tall pillar of sarsen that plays the starring role in the summer solstice drama. On the morning of the longest day, from the very center of Stonehenge, the sun's first fiery sliver appears to rise directly over the top of this ancient marker. It is a moment of breathtaking precision. a perfect alignment of architecture, landscape, and cosmos. But was the heel stone always alone? Some archaeologists point to a now empty stone hole right beside it, suggesting it may have once had a partner. This lost twin would have framed the sunrise even more dramatically, creating a gateway of stone through which the sun would dramatically emerge, a true portal for the solar deity. For a society whose entire existence revolved around the seasons, this was far more than a celestial light show. The summer solstice marked a pivotal turning point. It was the summit of the sun's power, the promise of warmth and abundant growth. To witness the sun reborn at its strongest, to see it so perfectly framed by their own creation, would have been a profound spiritual confirmation. It was a covenant with the heavens, a visible sign that the cosmic order was intact and that their rituals of planting and harvest were blessed. This alignment was not just an observation, it was a participation. By building a monument that captured this moment, they were actively holding up their end of a sacred bargain with the forces that gave them life. The stones were their anchor in the turning of the year, a way to ensure the sun would always find its way back to them. But the stones above ground are only half the story. Beneath the grass lies an older, more subtle pattern, the 56 mysterious pits known as the Aubrey holes. These cavities, arranged in a perfect ring just inside the Great Bank, formed the original blueprint of Stonehenge. For a long time, their purpose was a complete enigma. We knew they held cremated human remains, marking this as a place of ancestral veneration. Yet their precise number, 56, seemed arbitrary. Why not 50 or 60? This number held the key to a secret far grander than a simple cemetery. It revealed that the first builders were not just honoring the dead, they were tracking the heavens with a sophistication that borders on the magical. The number 56 is mathematically profound. It connects directly to the cycles of the moon, specifically to the prediction of eclipses. This is the heart of the Aubrey hole lunar theory. Picture this system in action. Imagine 3 white stones and 3 dark stones, 6 markers in total, placed at specific points around the circle of 56 holes. Each year, at the solstices or other key dates, a priest or astronomer would move these markers 1 hole forward in the circle. The white stones would track the moon's nodes, the invisible points in space where the moon's path crosses the sun's path. It is only at these nodes that an eclipse can occur. By moving these markers slowly around the 56-hole circuit, completing 1 full cycle every 18.6 years, they could predict when the sun, earth, and moon would align for a lunar or solar eclipse. To a prehistoric society, an eclipse was a moment of pure cosmic drama. The sun, the source of all life, could be swallowed by darkness in the middle of the day. The moon, a constant nightly companion, could turn a terrifying blood red. Being able to foresee such an event was not just science, it was the ultimate form of power. It was the ability to announce, "Do not fear, the sun will return, for we have foreseen it." This knowledge would have elevated the keepers of Stonehenge to the status of true magicians, intermediaries who could read the intentions of the gods in the silent movements of the stars. This transforms our understanding of the site's earliest phase. Before the first standing stone was ever raised, the Aubrey holes served as a celestial calendar, a predictive computer etched into the chalk of the earth. It was a place where the wisdom of the ancestors, buried within the holes, directly informed a living, breathing understanding of the cosmos. The magic of Stonehenge did not begin with its massive stones, but with these 56 silent, empty spaces, holding a secret that connected the earth to the sky. Beyond its visual alignment with the heavens, Stonehenge held a hidden dimension of power, one that was not seen but heard. The very stones themselves could sing. Recent acoustic studies have revealed something extraordinary about the smaller bluestones. When struck with a hammerstone, they produce a distinct, high-pitched ringing sound. a clear metallic chime that echoes with a surprising resonance. This is a unique property, a sonic signature that the local sarsen stones simply do not possess. In the quiet of the plain, surrounded by the towering circle, the sound of a ringing bluestone would have been a profound sensory experience. It was not just a noise, it was a vibration that could be felt deep within the body. This discovery transforms our understanding of the monument from a silent observatory into a giant, carefully tuned musical instrument. Imagine a ceremony at dawn or under a blanket of stars. A ritual leader, perhaps a shaman or priest, would move among the stones, striking specific bluestones in a particular sequence. Each strike would release a sharp, resonant tone into the air, a note in a sacred melody played on the bones of the earth. The sound would bounce and reverberate between the massive sarsens, creating a complex soundscape that enveloped everyone within the circle. This was not mere entertainment. In many ancient traditions, sound is a direct pathway to altered states of consciousness. The repetitive, resonant chiming could have been used to induce trances, guiding participants into a different realm of perception, where communication with the spirit world or ancestral guides was possible. The vibrations would have washed over them, blurring the line between the physical and the spiritual, between individual consciousness and the collective energy of the group. Furthermore, the specific acoustic properties of the bluestones tie directly back to their legendary healing powers. If these stones were believed to hold curative energy, then the act of striking them and bathing in their resonant frequencies could have been a form of sonic healing. The sound itself was the medicine, a tangible force that could drive out illness, cleanse the spirit, and restore balance. The entire structure becomes a therapeutic chamber, where the very air was charged with vibrational energy drawn from the mystical hills of Wales. Stonehenge was not a silent, static temple. It was a living, breathing entity that spoke through its stones, using a language of sound to heal, to connect, and to transcend the ordinary world. The ringing of the bluestones may have been more than just spiritual music. It could have been a form of ancient medicine. This leads us to a powerful theory that Stonehenge was a prehistoric sanctuary of healing, a Lourdes for the Neolithic world. Archaeological evidence provides compelling support for this idea. Analysis of the human remains buried at the site reveals something startling. A significant number of these individuals show clear signs of severe trauma, debilitating disease, or chronic illness. We find skeletons with broken bones that had been set, others with signs of serious infections, and some with deformities that would have caused a lifetime of pain. These were not the robust remains of local chieftains, but of people who had traveled great distances, likely in a desperate search for a cure. They were drawn by the legendary power of the bluestones, carried all the way from the mystical Preseli Hills. The folklore of Wales itself speaks of these hills as a place of healing, and the stones were believed to be imbued with that same curative energy. The journey to Stonehenge would have been a pilgrimage in the truest sense, a difficult and transformative passage of faith. Imagine a family traveling for weeks with a sick child, their hope resting on reaching the Great Circle. Upon arrival, they would participate in rituals designed to transfer the stone's power. They might touch the bluestones, drink water that had been poured over them to absorb their essence, or simply lie within the circle, bathed in the resonant sound waves believed to cleanse the body of illness. In this light, Stonehenge becomes a hospital where science and spirit were one. The sonic vibrations of the stones, the alignment with the life-giving sun, and the profound belief of the pilgrims all combined to create an environment of intense healing. It was a place where the physical and spiritual worlds met, offering not just a hope for miracle cures, but a tangible experience of restoration that has echoed through the ages. One of the most enduring images of Stonehenge is that of robed druids chanting among the stones at dawn. This powerful vision, however, is a beautiful anachronism, a case of history being rewritten by romantic imagination. The Celtic druids, the learned priestly class of the Iron Age, only appear in the historical record around 2,500 years ago. Stonehenge, as we have explored, was already a millennia-old ruin by that time, its great stones silent for centuries. The people who conceived of, built, and used Stonehenge were part of a much older, Neolithic culture whose name and language are completely lost to us. So how did this powerful, yet historically incorrect, link become so firmly fixed in our minds? The connection was forged not in the ancient world, but in the 17th century. The antiquarian John Aubrey, while surveying the site, noted that the complex patterns of pits and mounds reminded him of the open-air temples described in classical texts about the Druids. He proposed Stonehenge as a Druidic temple, and the idea captured the public's imagination. A century later, the myth was cemented by William Stukeley, an antiquarian who wrote extensively about Stonehenge and the Druids. Stukeley, living in an era fascinated by romantic ideals of nature and a lost golden age, portrayed the Druids not as the barbaric figures of Roman accounts, but as noble, enlightened philosophers, native British sages who worshipped the divine in the natural world. He saw Stonehenge as the ultimate expression of their pure, natural religion. This romantic vision was incredibly potent, and it transformed the monument in the public consciousness from a mysterious ruin into a known, almost familiar, spiritual landmark. This invented history, however, has taken on a life and a power all its own. In the modern era, the Druidic connection has been wholeheartedly embraced by contemporary pagan and Druidic movements. For them, the factual timeline is less important than the spiritual resonance. Stonehenge provides a physical anchor for their beliefs, a sacred space that feels ancient and powerful. Their celebrations at the solstices are not historical reenactments, but living traditions, a way to connect with the cycles of nature in a place that has been dedicated to that very purpose for thousands of years. The modern Druids, in a way, have completed a circle that John Aubrey began. They have filled the silent stones with a new voice, proving that the true power of Stonehenge lies not only in its original purpose, but in its endless capacity to inspire human awe and spiritual seeking across the ages. Beneath the visible alignments of sun and moon lies another, more subtle layer of energy. The ancient art of geomancy involves reading the sacred patterns of the earth itself, and Stonehenge seems to be a masterwork of this forgotten science. This is the study of ley lines, those mysterious channels of earth energy said to crisscross the landscape like invisible veins. According to this theory, Stonehenge was not placed on the Salisbury Plain by chance. It sits at a powerful nexus, a convergence point where multiple of these energetic pathways intersect. Imagine the entire British landscape as a living body, pulsing with subtle telluric currents, the natural electrical flows that move through the ground. The builders, deeply attuned to these forces, would have been able to sense these spots of intensified power, perhaps through dowsing or simple spiritual intuition. They chose this specific location because it was a natural power node, a place where the Earth's own vitality was concentrated and accessible. The monument's design then acts as a massive amplifier and focus for this raw energy. The Great Circle of Sarsens, with its precise geometry, could function like a lens, collecting the diffuse telluric currents and concentrating them within the sacred space. The bluestones, with their unique mineral composition and resonant qualities, might have acted as tuning stones, harmonizing this energy into a specific, usable frequency for ritual and healing. This explains why the effort to bring them from Wales was so monumental. Their specific geochemical signature was essential for the site's function. Within the circle, this amplified energy would have been palpable. Participants in ceremonies might have felt a tingling in the air, a deep vibration underfoot, or a sense of heightened awareness, all interpreted as direct contact with the spirit of the land. This transforms Stonehenge from a simple calendar into a living battery, a place where the Earth's own power was harnessed to facilitate healing, vision, and communication with other realms. The stones are not just pointing to the sky, they are rooted in a deep, energetic conversation with the world below. These silent stones hold a secret language of numbers and form. The layout of Stonehenge reveals a deep understanding of sacred geometry, a system where mathematical ratios reflect the fundamental order of the cosmos. This knowledge is most elegantly displayed in the rectangle formed by the 4 station stones. The proportions of this rectangle are not random. The sides create a perfect Pythagorean 3-4-5 triangle, a cornerstone of geometry that would not be formally documented for over 1,000 years after Stonehenge was built. This means the builders were using advanced mathematical principles to ensure their temple was perfectly square with the world. They were not just stacking rocks, they were inscribing eternal truths into the landscape. This 3-4-5 triangle is more than a building tool. It is a universal harmonic. It represents a perfect, stable relationship between 3 forces, a balance found throughout nature. By encoding this into their monument, the builders were aligning their sacred space with the very principles of cosmic balance. The geometry continues inward. The concentric rings of stones, the outer Sarsen circle and the inner bluestone circle, are not just nested rings. They are laid out with a consistent and precise measurement, a prehistoric yardstick that seems to have been used across Britain. The diameters of these circles are in a perfect ratio to one another, creating a harmonic progression from the outer world to the inner sanctum. Walking from the outer circle to the inner horseshoe would have been a journey through a series of mathematically defined spaces, each step moving you through a different vibrational quality, a different layer of sacred reality. This is the genius of Stonehenge. It is a machine built not of gears, but of proportion. The mathematics encoded here was not for practical calculation, it was a spiritual technology. They believed that by building according to these cosmic ratios, they were creating a resonance between the earth and the heavens. The circle, the triangle, the precise measurements, all of it was a prayer in stone, a permanent invocation of harmony that sought to hold the chaotic forces of the world at bay and keep their lives in tune with the music of the universe. At the very heart of the stone circle, lying flat and solitary, rests a great recumbent slab known as the altar stone. This central stone is a profound enigma, distinct from all the others in both its material and its placement. While the giant sarsens are a local gray sandstone and the bluestones hail from the Preseli Hills, the altar stone is composed of a greenish sandstone, a type of rock that geological analysis traces to a completely different region of Wales. Its journey to Salisbury Plain was yet another epic pilgrimage for a single, special stone, suggesting its role was absolutely pivotal. Positioned centrally within the inner horseshoe of towering trilithons, this stone would have been the undeniable focal point of any ceremony. All energy, all sightlines, and all processional paths would have converged upon it. What was its purpose? One compelling theory is that it served as a sacrificial table. Here, offerings to the sun or the earth would have been laid out, not necessarily of blood, but of grain, sacred objects, or symbolic gifts, a way to feed the spirits and ensure the fertility of the land. Another possibility casts it as a throne or a platform for a shamanic figure. During a solstice ceremony, a high priest or spiritual leader seated upon this stone would be framed by the massive arches of the trilithons, silhouetted against the rising sun. In that moment, they would become the living conduit between the people and the cosmos, a human axis mundi channeling celestial power down into the heart of the temple. The true power of the altar stone lies in its silent invitation to project meaning onto its weathered surface. It asks us to envision the final, sacred act in the Great Stone Theater, the moment when all the built-up energy of the monument was focused onto a single, powerful point of contact between our world and the next. The ground beneath Stonehenge holds more than just chalk and stone. It cradles the bones of the people who built it. Scattered within the 56 Aubrey holes were the cremated remains of at least 150 individuals. This was not a mass grave, but a sacred repository, a place where the ashes of the community were carefully interred within the very geometry of their celestial calendar. These were not just the dead, they were the ancestors, their physical essence becoming one with the monument's power. Nearby, the landscape is dotted with hundreds of burial mounds, great earthen barrows that cluster around the stone circle like a silent city of the dead. The individuals buried here were often of high status, laid to rest with precious artifacts, fine pottery, and distinctive stone maces that symbolized their authority. They were drawn to this place in death, seeking eternal rest within the spiritual gravity of the stones. This dense concentration of burials points to a profound spiritual practice, an ancestor cult that saw Stonehenge as the ultimate gateway between the worlds. For the living, this was a place to commune with the revered dead. The ancestors were not gone. They were transformed into spiritual guardians, their wisdom and blessing essential for the survival of the community. A farmer might come to ask for guidance on the best time to plant. A leader might seek a vision before a long journey. A healer might pray for the knowledge to cure the sick. The rituals performed here were a form of conversation, an attempt to tap into the collective memory and power of those who had come before. The cremated remains in the Aubrey holes served a dual purpose. They sanctified the ground while also anchoring the spirits of the ancestors to the very mechanism used to predict eclipses and solstices. This created a powerful fusion of cosmology and lineage. The ancestors became the keepers of time itself, their spirits mediating between the human world and the eternal cycles of the cosmos. To stand within the circle was to be surrounded by this cloud of witnesses, to feel the weight of generations who believed that death was not an end, but a change of state. In this sacred space, the living and the dead were partners in a timeless dance, united by stones that reached for the heavens while their roots remained deep in the ancestral earth. Stonehenge did not stand alone, but was the radiant heart of a vast ceremonial landscape. Stretching for miles across the Salisbury Plain are other, less famous but equally profound, earthworks that formed a sacred stage for spiritual journeys. To the north of the Great Stone Circle lies an immense enclosure known as the Cursus, a gigantic rectangular earthwork nearly 2 miles long. From the air, it looks like a prehistoric racetrack, but its purpose was far more solemn. This was not a place for sport, but for sacred procession. Imagine a long line of people moving in a slow, deliberate parade along the length of this enormous corridor, their footsteps tracing a path laid down by their ancestors centuries before the first stone was raised. The Cursus acts as a processional highway, a defined route that physically separates the journey from the ordinary world. Its eastern end aligns with the sunrise on an important day, perhaps marking the start of a ritual that would culminate at the stone circle itself. This was the first act of a great spiritual drama. The final approach to the circle was along the Stonehenge Avenue, a parallel pair of banks and ditches that sweeps in a graceful curve from the River Avon directly to the monument's entrance. This was the sacred pathway, the final bridge between the worlds. A pilgrim would first have traveled by water, a symbolic cleansing before stepping onto the avenue. As they walked, the great stones would have been hidden from view by the gentle rise of the land, building a powerful sense of anticipation. Then, at the final crest, the entire majestic circle would have suddenly risen before them, silhouetted against the sky. This was a moment of pure theatrical revelation, designed to overwhelm the senses and humble the spirit. Every step of this journey was a form of active meditation, a physical enactment of leaving the profane, everyday world behind and crossing a threshold into a space that was utterly sacred. The cursus and the avenue were not just roads, they were transformative instruments. By the time a participant finally stepped inside the ring of stones, they were no longer the same person who had begun the walk. They had been prepared, through ritual and landscape, to receive the profound energies waiting for them at the center. Centuries after its last stones were set, the true origins of the Great Circle had faded into the mists of time, leaving only a void of mystery. That void was irresistibly filled with legend. The most enduring of these stories comes from the 12th century, penned by a cleric named Geoffrey of Monmouth in his History of the Kings of Britain. In this grand tapestry of myth, Stonehenge is not the work of unknown Neolithic farmers, but a monument built by the great wizard Merlin. The legend tells of a treacherous massacre of 460 British nobles by the Saxon king Hengist. To honor the slain, King Aurelius Ambrosius desired a memorial of unparalleled grandeur. Merlin counseled him to seek the Giant's Ring, a circle of magical healing stones located on Mount Killarnowes in Ireland. These stones, he explained, had been brought from Africa by giants, who used them for healing baths and rituals. An army was dispatched to Ireland, but the stones proved impossible to move by human strength. With a wave of his hand and the utterance of powerful incantations, Merlin simply disassembled the Great Circle and had the stones shipped across the sea to Salisbury Plain, where they were re-erected exactly as they had stood. This myth, while fantastical, holds a kernel of profound truth. It correctly identifies that the stones were transported from a distant, mystical land, a folk memory of the incredible journey of the Bluestones from Wales. It attributes their movement to magic, which for a medieval mind was the only logical explanation for such an impossible feat. More importantly, it reveals a fundamental human impulse. When faced with a wonder that defies rational understanding, we turn to the supernatural. We populate the silence with gods, wizards, and giants, because these are the only forces mighty enough to account for the majesty before our eyes. The legend of Merlin is not a lie, it is a testament. It is the echo of the same awe we feel today, a recognition that the true story of Stonehenge is so magnificent, it borders on magic itself. The stones have guarded their secrets for millennia, but the modern era brought new tools to pry them loose. The first major scientific excavations began in the early 20th century under the meticulous direction of William Hawley. For nearly a decade, Hawley and his team systematically dissected the monument, uncovering the foundational slots for the Great Sarsens and rediscovering the long-lost Aubrey holes. It was Hawley who confirmed that Stonehenge was a cemetery, unearthing the cremated remains that proved its sacred role as a place of the ancestors. His work provided the first solid archaeological framework for the site's complex history. Then, in the 1950s, Richard Atkinson took up the trowel. His excavations were captured on film, bringing the mystery of Stonehenge into living rooms for the first time. It was Atkinson who discovered the stunning carvings of a dagger and axes on one of the Great Sarsens, proof of far-reaching cultural connections. More importantly, he meticulously documented the construction sequence we recognize today, cementing the idea of Stonehenge as a multi-generational project built in distinct phases. Yet even these careful digs could only reveal what lay directly beneath their trenches. The true revolution would come from above and below without ever breaking the ground. The advent of ground-penetrating radar and other remote sensing technologies has completely rewritten the map of the Salisbury Plain. This non-invasive magic lets archaeologists see through the earth, revealing a hidden world of pits, post holes, and structures invisible to the naked eye. The results were staggering. The surveys showed that Stonehenge was not an isolated temple, but the blazing core of a vast ceremonial complex. They revealed the presence of a gigantic, previously unknown circle of massive pits, just a short walk from the main monument, a structure so large it has been dubbed a superhenge. This newly discovered landscape is alive with hundreds of features, from processional pathways to smaller shrines and burial mounds, all arranged in a complex spiritual geography. The solitary circle we see today was once the pulsing heart of a bustling ritual center, a sacred city whose full scale and purpose we are only now beginning to comprehend. Each new technological sweep peels back another layer, proving that the greatest mysteries of Stonehenge may still lie buried, waiting for their silent stories to be heard. One skeleton can tell a story that the grandest stones sometimes keep silent. In the shadow of the Great Ditch, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a man who witnessed Stonehenge in its prime. He was buried not with the cremated masses within the Aubrey holes, but with a unique and telling set of grave goods. By his side lay a cluster of finely crafted flint arrowheads, their presence marking him as the Stonehenge archer. These were not hunting tools. The arrows were of a type designed for war, with barbs that would cause terrible wounds. This man was a warrior, and his burial so close to the sacred circle suggests he was a person of significant status, perhaps a chieftain or a guardian of the temple. His very body tells a story of a life of violence and physical strain. Analysis of his bones revealed a severe, partially healed injury to his kneecap, an affliction that would have left him with a pronounced and painful limp for years. Yet he survived this debilitating wound, a testament to a community that valued him enough to care for him through a long recovery. The arrowheads themselves provide another crucial clue to this lost identity. Their distinctive style is not local to the Salisbury Plain. They are of a type commonly found in what is now Central Europe, in the region of the Alps. This single burial opens a window onto a dynamic and connected prehistoric world. It suggests that the people who built and protected Stonehenge were not an isolated tribe, but part of a wider network of cultures, with individuals traveling vast distances across the continent. The archer may have been a migrant who brought new ideas and skills with him, or perhaps he was a traveler who found a new home and a position of honor among the monument's keepers. His life of conflict, marked by his weaponry and his wound, hints that the times were not always peaceful. The construction of Stonehenge occurred against a backdrop of social tension and potential violence, where the need to defend the sacred site was as real as the need to align it with the heavens. He is a reminder that the sublime spiritual yearning captured in the stones was rooted in the gritty, challenging, and often dangerous reality of human life. The archer bridges the immense gap between the monument's cosmic scale and the individual people who breathed, fought, and died within its powerful embrace. The human imagination abhors a vacuum, and the silent stones of Stonehenge have long been a canvas for our most spectacular speculations. When faced with a mystery of this magnitude, it is almost a tradition to look beyond our own history for answers. Could these stones be the work of visitors from other worlds? The ancient astronaut theory suggests that the monument's precision and the immense effort required are simply beyond the capabilities of prehistoric humans. Proponents point to the mathematical alignments and the sheer weight of the stones as evidence of extraterrestrial intervention, a celestial blueprint handed down to primitive mankind. Others look to a different kind of lost knowledge, weaving Stonehenge into the legend of Atlantis. In this narrative, the circle is a surviving outpost of that sunken, advanced civilization, built by Atlantean refugees who carried their sophisticated geometry and engineering to the shores of Britain. There are even older folktales that speak of a race of giants who roamed the earth, whose immense strength alone could explain how these rocks were stacked to the sky. These stories are compelling myths, grand narratives that replace the slow, patient work of generations with a single, dramatic act of godlike power. Yet when we hold them against the archaeological record, they begin to crumble. We have found the stone quarries, the antler picks used to dig the ditches, the hammerstones that shaped the Saracens. We have analyzed the cremated remains of the people who worshipped here and mapped the processional avenues they walked. The evidence on the ground tells a story of human ingenuity, of a society deeply connected to their land and their ancestors, capable of organizing a project that spanned centuries. The true wonder is not that aliens or giants built Stonehenge, but that ordinary people did. These fringe theories, however, are not failures of logic. They are a testament to the monument's enduring power to astonish us. They prove that even in our modern, scientific world, Stonehenge retains its magic. It defies our expectations of the past, forcing us to confront the incredible achievements of which humanity is capable when driven by a shared, spiritual vision. The stones do not need visitors from other stars to be miraculous. Their true mystery lies in the profound and very human desire to reach for eternity. Stonehenge is a masterpiece, but it is not an anomaly. This drive to build in stone on a colossal scale was a global phenomenon, a whisper of a shared human impulse that echoed across the ancient world. Far to the north, in the Boyne Valley of Ireland, the great mound of Newgrange rises from the earth like a green hill, but it is a hill with a secret. For 5 days around the winter solstice, a single, narrow beam of sunlight pierces a roof box above the entrance, traveling down a long passage to illuminate the central burial chamber in a dramatic blast of golden light. Like Stonehenge, it is a precise astronomical instrument built for the dead, a temple to the returning sun at the year's darkest hour. Across the sea in Brittany, France, the Carnac stones present a different kind of mystery. Here, over 3,000 standing stones are arranged in long, parallel rows that stretch for miles. Walking among them is like moving through a petrified army, a silent regiment whose purpose seems tied to the landscape itself. While their exact meaning is lost, alignments with the sun and moon suggest they, too, were part of a complex cosmic calendar, mapping the heavens onto the earth. Then there is Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a site that shatters all previous timelines. Built over 6,000 years before Stonehenge, its massive, T-shaped pillars are carved with intricate reliefs of animals and abstract symbols. This was not a settlement, but a ritual center, a gathering place for hunter-gatherers who carved a sacred mountain into the world's first known temple. The common threads weaving these sites together are as profound as they are clear. Each one represents a staggering communal effort, requiring the coordination of hundreds, if not thousands, of people over generations. They all demonstrate a sophisticated, hands-on knowledge of astronomy, a deep desire to mark the turning of the seasons and the cycles of the cosmos. And they are all intimately connected with the veneration of ancestors and the spirit world, serving as permanent gateways between the living and the dead. This was not a coordinated global plan, but a parallel awakening in separate corners of the world. As humanity transitioned from a nomadic to a settled life, we felt a common urge to anchor our lives to something eternal. We looked to the sky, we honored our forebears, and we used the most permanent material we could find to build monuments that would outlast our own fleeting existence. Stonehenge is not just a British wonder, it is a single, powerful verse in a global epic written in stone, a testament to a primal human need to find our place in the vast, turning universe. The stones have endured for millennia, but their future is not guaranteed. The very feet of countless admirers, the churning of the nearby road, and the relentless English weather all conspire to slowly erase this ancient wonder. To stand within the circle today is a privilege managed with immense care. Visitors no longer wander freely among the stones as they once did. Instead, a respectful path encircles the monument, allowing everyone to witness its majesty without contributing to the erosion of the sacred ground. The goal is a delicate balance to allow access while ensuring preservation. The most significant change is the ambitious project to restore the surrounding landscape. The busy roads that once cut through the ancient processional avenues have been closed and grassed over. The constant hum of traffic is being replaced by the sound of the wind, returning a sense of solitude and sanctity to the plain. This is more than just cosmetic improvement. It is an act of profound respect, an attempt to heal the scars of the modern world and reconnect the stones to their original, expansive context. Stonehenge now exists in a careful dance between its past and its present. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a designation that recognizes its value to all of humanity. It is a living church for modern druids and pagans who gather at the solstices to celebrate the old ways, their chants and rituals giving voice to the stones once more. And for millions more, it is a universal symbol, a reminder of the incredible heights human beings can reach when we are driven by a shared vision. It asks us a simple, enduring question. What will we build, and what will we preserve that might speak our name to the ages? Stonehenge stands as a silent symphony of stone, a monument where engineering, astronomy, and esoteric belief converge into a single, breathtaking vision. We have traced the incredible journey of its stones across land and sea, a testament to a will that could move mountains with nothing but ropes and ingenuity. We have decoded its celestial alignments, where the summer solstice sun and the wandering moon were captured in a perfect, permanent embrace, and we have felt the pulse of its deeper purpose, a sacred space for healing, for communing with ancestors, and for harnessing the Earth's own subtle energies. Yet for all we have uncovered, the central mystery endures. What profound, unifying faith could compel a civilization to dedicate 1,500 years to a single, sacred project? This circle is far more than an ancient ruin. It is a mirror. It reflects our own boundless capacity for wonder, for collaboration, and for the relentless pursuit of meaning. It asks us what we, as a species, are capable of when we unite behind a shared spiritual dream. The stones do not whisper their final secrets. They invite you to join the conversation. What does this ancient wonder awaken in you? Share your own theories and reflections below, and become part of the next chapter in the endless story of Stonehenge.